Aloha and good afternoon. I'm Dylan Ancheta in the Hawaii News Now Digital Center. We thank you for tuning in to this special live stream. Happening right now, military officials are providing an update on the downed plane in Kaneohe Bay from last week. Let's listen in.
Their wisdom, and their counsel, frankly. The list is too long to detail here, but I would say that fairly early on in the incident, individuals like Representative Takuda, Senator Kaneohe, and many others reached out almost immediately to see how they could be helpful and for an update on what was going on. State agencies, State of Hawaii Department of Health, the Office of Hazard Evaluation and Emergency Response, Department of Land and Natural Resources, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the list goes on and on. The number of individuals and partners who were very, very quick to reach out to provide themselves as a resource to lend their expertise as we dealt with the situation. I'm immensely grateful for the support that I've received from them. Our plan for today is that I'm going to kind of detail some of the initial actions in response that Marine Corps Base Hawaii undertook moments after the aircraft departed the runway and entered the water. I will then turn the microphone over to Rear Admiral Lennox, and he will address follow-on actions that are being taken as we get into the recovery phase of operation, and then there will be time for questions and answers at the end. I would say that I have a deep personal and professional commitment to this. I'm a lifelong sailor and avid waterman and a scuba diver, so I'm personally and professionally interested in the environment and the ecosystem, in the unique culture and history of Hawaii, and incredibly sensitive to the sacredness of the Mokopu Peninsula. And so that position has formed my priorities that I relayed to the team as we dealt with this, and my team has taken that on board, and their actions have followed based on that interest and those priorities. And I'm incredibly mindful of the need to be a good neighbor, to be a good steward of those resources, and to make sure that we have open and frank communications with leadership, both military but also civilian, and those that represent the interests and equities of this great place. Because of that, that posture and position, I will tell you that Marine Corps Base Hawaii takes a very strong and active posture with respect to dealing with crisis. And that goes across the various agencies here aboard the base, from our Aircraft Rescue and Firefighting Department, our Waterfront Operations Department, which by design is intended to deal with spill response, and then some of our EMS and our security postures. And I'll tell you, coincidentally, it just happened to be on Friday, so 3 days before the incident. My waterfront operations team was doing a pre-planned drill. They were on the water here in the bay for several hours, and I was on the boats for close to 2 hours. And some of these subject matter experts that have been here helping us deal with this incident were also on board the boat, just as part of our drilling and our training process. That was something that we regularly plan and train to. And so that really helped in the initial moments after the aircraft departed the runway. Our response was quick. Within minutes, our waterfront operations team was postured and responding to ensure there were no deleterious effects on the environment. I would say that that posture has then replicated as the subsequent days have gone. Our posture from the initial stages has just improved daily, and that has been in coordination with some of our state agencies, helping us to get to what right looks like. As you might expect in an emergency such as this, there's a lot of things that happen fairly concurrently. And so a lot of actions are being taken, although I will brief them maybe sequentially, they're happening at about the same time. So I have what's called an Emergency Operations Center. It's attached to my headquarters. We activate that in times of any crisis, whether it's a military crisis, whether it's a climatological or environmental crisis, or in this case, an aircraft mishap. That space is designed, it has the communication equipment, it's got the room, the computers, the desks, so that I can have representatives from across the Marine Corps Base Hawaii, but also from our state, federal, and local agencies. So we have a representative in the room so that when we're having conversations about our posture and what we are doing, everybody is synchronized and we have the opportunity to engage and to ensure that all the various equities are being addressed before we take actions. My guidance and posture has been, first, the safety of the aircrew. Fortunately, as everybody knows by now, all 9 members safely evacuated on their own, which let me immediately turn to the environmental conditions and posturing the base in order to ensure that we were protecting the environment. And so in that, by standing up the EUC, a variety of things were happening near immediately. While I was communicating with some of the state and congressional leadership that I mentioned earlier, as well as my military leadership, my Environmental Compliance and Protection Division Director was reaching out directly to the state. As I mentioned earlier, some of those agencies, HERE Office, DLNR, Coast Guard, my logistics folks were reaching out to Mobile Dive Salvage Unit 1 and getting some of those folks postured and to start flowing from the other side of the island to Marine Corps Base Hawaii, so we could have on-site representation both in the Emergency Operations Center but also down at the edge of the runway to make sure that our response was robust, was thoughtful, but was also timely. Since moments after the incident, we have maintained a 24-hour posture, both on land but also from the water on that site. So my waterfront operations folks have had boats in the water continuously. They have been augmented by Department of Land and Natural Resources, Fish and Wildlife, and some other agencies as well. The U.S. Coast Guard has certainly been postured and had folks on scene as well to help us with that. As I alluded to earlier, initially we had a single strain of what we call containment boom, which is material designed to float and to capture any hazardous contaminants and to keep it in one spot for any subsequent cleanup. Those actions happened right around the 30-minute mark. We had completely boomed off that aircraft. As the days have progressed, we added double and triple layer levels of boom. We added absorbent sweep to the inside layers of the boom. And we anchored the aircraft to ensure that it wasn't able to move and create any further damage to the reef. And some of those operations, again, were happening simultaneously. So while we were working with Mobile Dive Salvage Unit 1 to anchor the aircraft using bulldozers aboard the land, our waterfront operations were continuing to improve the posture from an environmental perspective. And again, while this is all going on, communications with Navy leadership about their posture and getting resources flowing to Marine Corps Base Hawaii. At this moment, I'll turn it over to the Admiral for his comments, but I would just like to reiterate my deep thanks to everybody who's been incredibly helpful along the way. From my estimation, while an unfortunate incident for sure, the fact that the aircraft tanks have been secure meant that those hazardous contaminants have been contained. The interaction with DOH and the HERE office helped us posture as best as we could for defueling operations. And so I've been really thankful, and I think our response has been everything I would want it to be if a crisis were to occur. So that thoughtful, measured, nuanced approach, I think, has really been helpful. So again, my thanks to everyone who's reached out to me, who has reached out to my team, and it's not just me, it's at levels below me, really linking up those subject matter experts with my team to make sure that our response is where it needs to be. So at this time, I'll turn the microphone over to Rear Admiral Lennox, and thank you for your time.
Hey, thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, Colonel Beaven, for your comments. I'm Rear Admiral Kevin Lennox, and I'm here today representing the United States Navy in our efforts to recover P-8 side number 561 from Kaneohe Bay. The Navy is a committed member of this community and a sincere advocate for the protection of our shared environment. Since the incident and through the weekend, this team has been singularly focused on developing a salvage plan for this aircraft that prioritizes the safety of personnel and the environment here in Kaneohe Bay. As a result of that, we're mindful that we need to do better in communicating with our neighbors here about our progress, and that's why we're all here today. We recognize and understand the significance of this bay, not just as a strategic location for the military, but as a critical ecosystem and a cherished part of the local community. We appreciate your understanding and patience as we navigate through the salvage process. Following the Navy and Marine Corps team's immediate response at Marine Corps Base Hawaii, Navy Mobile Dive and Salvage Unit 1, based on Pearl Harbor, began assessment and planning to execute the salvage plan. Navy divers arrived here within hours and worked quickly to stabilize the aircraft to minimize the risk of a spill. And the first step in that salvage plan was to remove as much fuel from the aircraft as possible. To prepare for that process, the Navy divers went back to Pearl Harbor to familiarize themselves with the P-8, and they practiced connecting and disconnecting the fuel lines to ensure that they weren't doing it for the first time in the water. Yesterday, the team executed a slow and methodical defueling process. This was done to minimize the risk of environmental harm in the follow-on salvage process. We estimate that the aircraft had just over 2,000 gallons of fuel on board, and the team extracted all the fuel that they could get out of those tanks. This process was completed successfully without any fuel being released into the bay. Our divers also conducted a hydrographic survey to better assess the coral and marine environment around the aircraft. The survey is helping the Navy plan a recovery operation that minimizes impact to the critical ecosystem here in Kaneohe Bay. As we move to the next phase of salvage, the team of experts is working tirelessly to develop a course of action that prioritizes personnel safety, environmental safety, and the restoration of mission capability. Extensive technical analysis from both salvage and aircraft engineering specialists are integrated in developing this plan. The process has brought together experts, experience, and equipment from across the Department of Defense, interagency partners, and private industry from as far away as Singapore and Louisiana. The safety and security of our community is paramount and our top priority. Our collective goal is to remove the aircraft as soon and as safely as possible. Once the aircraft has been removed, storage here on Marine Corps Base Hawaii will prioritize finishing the mishap investigation. Then we'll move on to aircraft salvage and repair. The P-8 Poseidon is the U.S. Navy's multi-mission maritime patrol and reconnaissance aircraft. It conducts anti-submarine warfare, anti-surface warfare, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and humanitarian response. The P-8 is an essential part of our fleet and the Navy's mission, and we will do everything we can to retain the operational capabilities of this aircraft. I also want to assure you that a thorough and comprehensive investigation into this incident is underway. An aviation mishap board is here on site, and an administrative investigation led by a senior naval officer in the Maritime Patrol and Reconnaissance Force from outside the chain of command of the aircrew in question has been designated and has begun to review investigative materials. The Navy is committed to learning from this investigation, regardless of the cause. These lessons will be valuable in preventing such incidents going forward, make us a better force, and make us more combat capable. Let me emphasize that the Navy is not just a military organization operating within this community. The Navy is a part of this community. We share in its joys and its hardships. We care deeply about the impact of our activities and incidents such as this one. I'll conclude with a thank you to you, the media, for your role in keeping the public informed. We appreciate your support as we work to remove the aircraft from the bay, and we're committed to providing regular updates as more information becomes available. Thank you for coming today, and I'll turn it over to the moderator for questions.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, so open up a couple questions and answers. So we'll try to limit to one question, one follow-up. We'll get with everyone and see how much time we have. So we'll start with you, ma'am. Go ahead.
I'm Jen Louise with Page One News. Can you tell me, you said that you still need to complete the investigation and then begin the salvage. Do you have any idea of how long the investigation will take and when the salvage exactly will take place?
Okay, so the salvage and the investigation are two separate things. So I'll start with the investigation. So every Navy aircraft squadron has a graduate of the Navy Safety School there who is trained in how to conduct these investigations. So when a mishap happens, that person with someone from outside the chain of command uses the resources of Naval Safety Command and looks at everything to have to do with the incident, from the aircrew, the aircraft itself, the procedures, the environment, the design of the aircraft, everything to find the root cause and to find anything that could possibly have contributed to the aircraft. And then we take those lessons and we learn from them. So there is no time schedule on that. We want them to, we don't interfere. I will have nothing to do with that investigation. The chain of command doesn't interfere with that investigation. We let the investigators go where it takes them so that we learn everything we can from this so that it won't happen again. So that's the first part. The second part of that is you were asking how long will the salvage take? And we're also being conditioned based on that. We have three priorities, which is we want to make sure that we protect the safety of the individuals who are conducting the salvage. This is a heavy aircraft. We're going to be using a lot of equipment, and it's a very technical operation in a marine environment. As part of this mishap, there were no injuries and no loss of life, and we want to continue that through the salvage process. So we are gathering all of the equipment and all of the procedures and the technical analysis we need to be able to safely lift this out of the bay and onto the runway. We want to do that in a way that does not harm the environment, and then we also, as a third priority, we want to see if we can do it in a way where we can preserve the capability of this aircraft.
When will that start?
So it has already started. So the first part of the salvage was figuring out how to get the fuel out of that aircraft. A P-8 has never been defueled underwater. So through the holiday weekend, we were reaching back to Naval Air Systems Command at Patuxent River to understand the defueling connections there. We worked with them. We got the resources we needed. We had 2 fuel trucks arriving here yesterday at 7 in the morning. Once we got them in position, and in conjunction with the state of Hawaii, who looked at what we were doing and looked at the risks of it, we got the hoses out there. We made sure there was no leakage from any of the couplings of the hose, and then we were able to get just about all of the fuel out of the aircraft, which will reduce the risk going forward when we go to lift it out and get it onto the runway. So now we're gathering all the different resources. So there's kind of 2 ways we can probably get the aircraft out. One would be to float it and get it within range of a crane based there on the runway. And we're looking at the site there to see if it can support the heavy equipment it would take to do that. And then we would lift it onto the runway, and it will settle down onto its landing gear, which is still in good condition. The other option is to float it, and then we would use roller bags, so circular kind of cylinders. It will float onto the top of those and then roll up onto the runway there. Those float bags are the part that I was talking about with Louisiana earlier. They're being loaded onto a plane in Louisiana, and we expect those float bags to arrive here on Wednesday. So once we have all the equipment and have decided, looked at both of those courses of action and decided which one is the most feasible, the safest, and the most likely to achieve our 3 objectives, we'll start moving forward and in detail looking and making sure that we can execute it right the first time. And that's going to involve looking at the environment, looking at the weather, having all the resources here, and then executing.
All right, ma'am, over to you for a question.
I'm Audrey McAvoy with the Associated Press. Can you tell us what environmental features are currently underneath the airplane? Is it coral or sand or rock?
So the aircraft is sitting mostly on its landing gear. If you've seen it, I think you'll get a chance to see it afterwards. It's slightly canted to the right. So the right engine is resting on coral, but the aircraft has maintained a lot of its buoyancy. So for the most part, it's just sitting on its landing gear. I guess I would have to defer to the folks who have dove there. So I do have Commander Mark Anderson, who's the CEO of the Salvage team. Do you want to just give a comment on what it looks like where the aircraft is sitting?
Good afternoon, Commander Mark Anderson, Commanding Officer of Mobile Diving and Salvage Unit 1. As to your question, the aircraft, it is currently, there's a mixture of coral and sand underneath that. I believe right now it's the front landing gear is resting in a pocket. It's off and on touching depending a little bit on the tide. And then it is the left engine is resting on coral. The rest of the aircraft is really, it's those 2 points. And there's some positive buoyancy on there. So as the tide is coming in and out, there's a little bit of rising. So we assess it's not the full weight of the aircraft that is on that, but rather, partial.
Can you follow up?
I can add a little bit more to that. So we've done the assessment, but the Navy dive team is there really to assess the stability of the aircraft sitting there in the water to reduce the chances of anything being released. But once we get the aircraft out of there, our job is not done. Then we need to go. Then we can really come in, take a good look at the situation on the ground. We can bring in our partners here in the state of Hawaii and look to make this right going forward.
My follow-up would be, is there any precedent for the 2 different options you mentioned for removing the aircraft off the fleet? Has it been done anywhere else in the world?
So each one of these situations is different, based on how far you are from land. In this particular instance, it's in the water with the landing gear down. So a lot of times when aircraft go into the water, it's a belly landing. And then here we have coral, and we want to make sure we preserve that coral. Other places it might be rock. So each incident is unique, and that's why you have to bring in expertise. And the dive and salvage industry is a pretty low-density, high-value kind of situation where they're scattered around the world, and we have to bring all of that to focus here on this point at this time to come up with the right answer.
Okay, sir, over to you for a question.
Dan Acosta with Star Advertiser. I have a question for the Colonel regarding flight operations and how they've been disrupted. My understanding is that fixed wing operations have been diverted somewhere else. Can you go into some more detail about what is flying what's been diverted, and how it's affecting your?
Yes, sir, sure. We have maintained rotor wing and tilt rotor operations. They can safely conduct their operations from the portion of the airfield where they're currently located. Obviously, because of the holiday period, normal flight operations were fairly curtailed this last week. I have suspended fixed wing operations, of course. We need to make sure that the position of the aircraft does not move. Obviously, we can't have aircraft landing while the P8 is still in the water where it's at. As we look at forward operations and continuing operations in this next week, I will be looking very closely. I will likely authorize some one-time departures to reposition certain aircraft over to Hickam. Some of the things we've taken a look at from a technical perspective is ensuring that one, those aircraft can depart safely, but also where they would depart from. So, obviously concerned, want to ensure that no exhaust blast, comes back and affects the salvage site or salvage operations, or that exhaust blast, hits the vertical stabilizer on the aircraft, and causes it to shift underwater. I will say, and I alluded to some follow-on actions in my statements, but Mobile Dive Salvage Unit 1 has continually increased our posture. So we, the first night that it happened, within several hours, we had positioned several bulldozers at the runway that we had connected housers to the landing gear. We have subsequently added anchors, into the water and some other things to ensure that the aircraft stays in its position. And so we're taking a very hard look at fixed wing operations, but likely we would reposition some aircraft to the other side of the island. And I'll be looking very closely at the technical and what we think the impacts will be before I authorize that.
I do have a follow-up. Okay. So, Admiral and Colonel, so you mentioned a third-party investigation is being conducted. Who's doing that? And what was the crew coming to Kaneohe to do? Was it, why were they coming?
All right, so let me do that first, that last question first, because it is related to your previous question. So that P8 is forward deployed from Whidbey Island, Washington. They are here as part of 3rd Fleet's Homeland Defense mission. So they're here to protect Hawaii and to be 3rd Fleet's eyes forward here in the Central Pacific. So when, and there's just the one plane here, so when it went in the water, that created potentially a gap in our coverage, and by the next day, another P8 came out here, and they're operating and covering that mission from Hickam Air Force Base now. Now, as far as the investigations, the Navy does 2 investigations on these. One is a safety investigation, and that is one where there's a concept of privilege, where everything is off the record just for safety. And that's to give everyone who was involved in it, from maintainers to air traffic controllers, anyone involved, to say exactly what happened without fear of being personally liable for that. And that's important because in naval aviation, we have to learn from our lessons. We've been doing this for 100 years, and our safety record has been improving across that entire time because of our ability to look at ourselves and learn root causes. Separate from that is we call it JAGMAN, but it's a legal investigation. And that one, people are able to bring in a lawyer or whatever they need to do. And that's a separate investigation, and they're not allowed to use any materials from the safety investigation. Both of those are conducted by senior officers in the Navy.
Commander, could I just clarify one thing? So the plane that replaced, the crew and plane that replaced the one that's in the water.
Yes.
Did it go to Hickam or did it come here?
It went to Hickam so that they continue operating. Yes.
My name is Eddie Dowd with Hawaii News Now. Admiral, unfortunately, it's been more than 2 years since the Red Hill crisis, and we're still learning just recently about the information that was withheld during that crisis when it was unfolding. That's created distrust among the public, especially with the Navy, that I know the Navy's been working to address. But when it comes to this incident, we're hearing that, to the Navy's knowledge, no fuel has leaked. But among the public, there is some skepticism for taking that information for face value. So my question to you is, do you think, as the commander in charge of this, you're taking anything away from the Red Hill situation? And when it comes to transparency, could we see some of these images underwater of the possible damage or the aircraft, just to increase that transparency?
No, and I'm certainly aware of the distrust that came out of the whole Red Hill thing. That we have a 3-star task force to take care of that. But certainly my goal is to be open and transparent in everything we do here. So during the entire defueling evolution yesterday, we had the state's on-scene commander here, so from the state of Hawaii, watching the whole thing take place. There's a clear hose that we could see what was coming out of the tanks. She actually had the chance to, well, we worked with Hawaii and said, hey, here's what we're planning on doing. Do you have any concerns? They asked, hey, can you put another containment boom around the scene? And so now we have 3 containment booms around there. So we're trying to be as open and transparent as we can. And then even as we were trying to determine how much fuel came out, we're being very diligent to use 2 different ways to measure it. We tested the fuel today to make sure that what came out didn't have any water in it, and it was basically perfect fuel. So we could actually put that in another plane and it would be good to go, which tells us that no water was sucked into there, which tells us that the fuel system is still intact.
My follow-up is, have images been taken under the water of the reef and of the wheel that potentially damaged the coral?
I believe so, but I would have to defer. I just got here recently. Do you want to take that one? Yeah.
Yes, so one of the first actions we did is when our team showed up there, they showed up not only to set the lines out to ensure the aircraft could not move, they were taking underwater images of the surrounding area. At the time, there was some images collected of both the coral and the airplane. However, the focus really was on the airplane and ensuring that there was no leaking coming out and that it was structurally sound so we could help our plan efforts. Since then, we have been conducting hydrographic surveys to get understanding of the depth, the contour lines to inform our planning to make the safest plan for both the people and the environment. We will continue, as we go forward, we will continue to collect imagery, and once that aircraft is out, it will enable a full look at what the coral looks like.
Sorry, just to clarify, Admiral, is it possible that the public may at some point be able to see these images?
I would have to actually check on that, but in the interest of being open and transparent, I would hope so.
Excuse me, I'm Marcel Honore with Civil Beat. Generally, I'm interested in the initial assessment, environmental assessment, and specifically, Rear Admiral, you mentioned that no fuel appears to have been lost in the defueling process.
Correct.
But maybe the Colonel could also help clarify. I'm wondering, you mentioned that it was about 30 minutes before the initial booms went in. Did your assessment find that whether it's petroleum or any other types of materials leaked out of the aircraft prior to these containment measures?
So, and that was when I was at the morning meeting this morning, which had all the stakeholders, NOAA, State of Washington, or State of Hawaii, and everyone who's been involved in this across the Marine Corps, the Coast Guard, and said, does anyone have any knowledge of anything that has leaked out of that aircraft? And the answer was no. So those booms are there as a contingency in case that happened, but the aircraft's in remarkably good condition and has full integrity. So no, I'm not aware of anything that has leaked out of that aircraft. But do you have
I would like to
that?
clarify. We were complete with that initial booming at 30 minutes. So we maintain what we call a boom boat. It's a boat with about 800 feet of boom in the water. And so that within minutes, that was at the crash site, and we had started deploying the boom. So we were completely complete by 30 minutes, but we had our waterfront operations team on site I'm estimating 5 minutes. So we had eyes on the scene. We have maintained eyes on the scene 24 hours a day since then, which is why I have a very high level of confidence. And my Environmental Compliance and Protection Division Director was also on the scene immediately. So we've had the folks who deal with environment by matter of profession on there. So that's what gives me kind of the level of confidence that I have.
Follow-up would deal with the underlying coral reef. You guys have mentioned the 2 points, the wheel and the engine at rest, but did your assessment show any damage to the coral in terms of the, upon skidding off of the runway and into the water? Can you comment on any damage found from that?
Do you want to handle that one? Sure.
I believe the first assessments, again, not specifically looking at it, there might have been some minor damage. We haven't really looked at where it impacted, but from what we can tell from the ground, I mean, there is no massive chunks missing. There's nothing, that is of great concern right now. Again, the focus is on ensuring stability of the aircraft and making sure we can get that and have a plan. And then following on, we can go look at that and do the follow-on investigation and, getting video from that site.
All right, so we want to make sure we have time to get you guys out to the scene as well. So Admiral and Colonel, if you guys have any closing remarks or?
No, I'll just say I appreciate you guys coming here. I apologize that we did not get the story out to you guys quicker. We had the team here. We were very focused on protecting the environment, preserving the aircraft, and moving forward to get the fuel out of there to minimize any risk of the environment here. But going forward, as things come up, we'll certainly make sure that you guys are part of our communication strategy, and thank you for coming here today.
Thank you, everybody, for coming today.
There you go. That wraps up a news conference with military officials providing the latest on the downed aircraft in Kaneohe Bay. This is a look at some of the images of the scene. That what we learned today is that plane is still in the water, sitting on a coral reef. Officials are saying, however, it is mostly on its landing gear and the plane has retained its buoyancy, and they are working their best to try and figure out a plan to remove this aircraft as soon as possible. They are also promising to upkeep transparency and provide updates as often as possible to us so we can pass it along to you. That's going to wrap up this HNN special news conference. I'm Dylan Ancheta in the HNN Digital Center. Be sure to stick with Hawaii News Now in later editions for the latest on this story and others, including the first alert weather day that is set for Tuesday for the island of Kauai. Of course, the Kona low is forming to the west of the state, which means we could see some flooding rains and some thunderstorms as early as tonight into tomorrow and the days after. Jennifer Robbins will have your full forecast coming up later tonight.